Hey guys, welcome back to Joko Yo. When I don't know if you've noticed if you're a listener of this podcast, but if you've been checking through, we're on episode 70 something, and every single one of those episodes is named after a song title or some song lyrics. So I don't know why, I just did it that way, and I mean, obviously I'm a pretty big fan of music. Doesn't really matter which genre, just music, I don't know. Anyway, so, if you do know music like I do, or even at least similar or somewhat in the ballpark, you may be familiar with the following names of some rock royalty. So I'm going to give you some names if you know these names, right? There's a point to it. Neil Young, Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin, Pete Townsend of The Who, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, Eric Clapton, Iggy Pop. Now, the reason why I mention those guys, those are all wow, those are big names, right? All of those guys are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. All of them. And they all credit a few people for their influence. But every single one of those in different interviews have credited the same man for inspiring them to pick up a guitar. Now, there may be other ones, but they all mention this same guy. And that same guy they all mention is Fred Lincoln Ray Jr. Now, known as Link Ray, he was born in 1929 in the town of Dunn on the Harnett side of the Harnett-Johnston border. Now, he is credited with the popularization of the power chord, which is, he's considered by most rock historians as one of the fathers of rock. And given that power chords are at the heart of not only rock, but also metal and punk, he changed the course of American music history. Changing the course of anything tends to make some people nervous, particularly the people that don't want it changed because they're benefiting from the way it currently is. And Link Ray's music made people nervous. Nervous enough that his song Rumble was banned in New York and Boston for fear that it would incite teenage gang violence in the way of, say, West Side Story. Whatever. Rolling Stone said that Link Ray is number 45 of the greatest guitarists of all time. Clapton and Dylan have performed his music on stage. You can even hear Rumble in one of the best soundtracks of all time, the Pulp Fiction soundtrack, among others. Many people have lobbied for his inclusion in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, with some people calling him the trunk of the rock and roll tree. Now, that's all cool and all. He's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Should be, definitely. He is also a proud Shawnee Native American. And this is kind of cool. See, being from around Dunn, myself, I grew up around the town, or near the town anyway. This area of southeast Johnston, southeast Harnett, and northwest Sampson is rich with Native American history. Rich. Which sort of takes me to another pretty big event in Dunn history. See, the last couple of podcasts, the last couple of episodes, we've spoken about 2 episodes ago the blinding of Isaac Woodard from another neighboring county. Another podcast was about the Benson Five from this area, and see, this area is a little bit different than a lot of areas in the United States, especially when we consider the civil rights of the 50s and 60s civil rights era and the struggles to make things right. Integration, especially school integration in this area and in central North Carolina, has been discussed in this podcast numerous times. Listeners to this podcast will be familiar, I hope, with the Supreme Court case of Brown versus Board of Education and the multiple attempts and methods of some of our leaders to delay equality, equity, and justice. Now, any student of recent American history knows of Rosa Parks and Ruby Bridges. The attempts of parents to try to make sure public schools did right by African American children who had to attend colored schools, I quote colored schools, which were generally underfunded, understaffed. These schools were intended for African American children, and they were designed to be second class to the white schools. There's no beating. There's no difference. I mean that's understood. But after Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, many people pushed, and in some cases are still pushing, to enforce educational justice, equity, and equality. But for us in Central North Carolina, I mean, it's going to, pardon the pun, but it wasn't really just all black and white. There was a third group that sort of gets lost in the whole conversation. See, again, the leaders of Johnston County's neighbor to the southwest, Harnett County, resisted integration with vigor, using, among other excuses, that Harnett had a good high school for African American kids in Dunn, North Carolina, and it was partially funded by the Rosenwald Fund and Booker T. Washington himself. Never mind that Dunn, on the eastern edge of Harnett County, was 46 miles away from the western edge of Harnett County. White students in Western Harnett did not have any such trouble attending school. If you're in Western Harnett and you happen not to be white, you had to go 46 miles away to attend that school if you had the ability to get there. And as unjust as that was. Now, as I mentioned earlier, for years there were white schools and, quote, colored schools. And in this area there were also Indian schools that fell outside of that whole conversation. Now, the closest Indian school, again, in quotes, because that's what they called them, to this area, was in an area called Maple Grove, even further east than Dunn, but in an area, again, rich with Kahari Native Americans. And just like it was law that white teachers taught white students in white schools, and the same went for African American population, Native American children were to be taught by Native American teachers. Now, there were very few proponents of education for these groups. I mean, Native Americans did not have a Booker T. Washington, a W.E.B. Du Bois to advocate for them, and they certainly did not have qualified teachers for these children for most of the population. And these teachers, sometimes they were high school students, and they tended to come from really one college for Native Americans in this state, Pembroke, or at least in the region anyway. And as a result, teachers had to travel from Pembroke and Lumberton 66 miles away to teach school at this school on the eastern edge of Harnett County. It didn't matter to lawmakers if it was Lumbee teaching Kahari, if it were Saponi teaching the Meherrin, or the Waccamaw teaching the Occaneechi. Band or tribal affiliation didn't matter, just color. And at least in Harnett, those schools only ran through 8th grade. Unlike black and white, there were no high schools for Native Americans in this area. The doors of both white schools and black schools were closed to them. Now, there was the Eastern Carolina Institute for Indian Children in neighboring Sampson County. Certainly, black schools were bombed in Johnston, namely Cooper and Bagley, during integration. But, the bus used to transport Native Americans to this institute from Harnett County to Sampson County, well, that was bombed also. No one was injured, but the bus driver was convinced that, in his words, an Indian did it out of disgust, that the Native American kids had to be bused so far when there were white schools and black schools, again, within like 5 miles of a lot of these kids. And no high school except the one all the way in Sampson County. That high school, it had no library or even a lunchroom. I mean, it was subpar to say the best. So students and their families began in the late 50s and early 60s to just refuse assignment there. They were not being served at all. On August 1st, 1960, some parents of Native American students in this area requested transfers to White Dunn High School. If Brown versus Board of Education were followed, that wouldn't have been a problem. Because, that was a law already. They should have been allowed anyway, But the applications were each rejected for various and invented reasons. So some parents decided to just take their kids. On opening day, 1960, rejected application or not. Now, Eastern Harnett and Sampson were tri-segregated counties through the 1960s. For example, at the Stewart Movie Theater in Dunn, for example, which is now the home of the Harnett Regional Theater, at the Stewart Theater, that's the place I saw Star Wars in 1977. The downstairs seating was for whites, upstairs was for blacks, but there was a sign hanging prominently at the ticket booth saying, quote, "No accommodations for Indians." This was the norm in the region. And no matter the fact that parents and kids went to go talk to the owner of the establishment to say, look, this is not fair, he stuck to his guns, and you're not seeing a movie in Dunn, North Carolina if you're Native American. Opening day in 1960 for Harnett County was the 31st of August, and on this day, 13-year-old Huey Maynor, Edward Chance, Edgar Chance, Stoney Chance, Helen Maynor, Henrietta Maynor, Imogene Chance, Juanita Chance, and 13 other Native American children refused to attend the East Carolina Indian School and arrived at all-white Dunn High School at 8:30 a.m. as the bell rang on the first day of school. They walked into a classroom and simply sat down. Alarmed, the teachers alerted the principal. Well, the teachers, they all went in one classroom. The teacher alerted the principal, who called them out and told them to leave quietly or let the police move them forcefully. They chose the police option, and they came back the next day. But the Harnett County Board of Education had filed a restraining order, which was granted by Judge W.H.S. Burgwin. Still, they came. In fact, they came, and according to Huey Maynor, who was again at 13 at the time, there were officers there the next morning shouting through bullhorns at the children and their parents. There was no need for bullhorn. I mean, if you've ever been to the place, you can hear people across the front lawn, but it was more to intimidate, telling them that if they stepped on the school property, they would be arrested. And there was a crowd watching this to see what was going to happen. So, each of the children looked at one another, spread out 3 feet apart on the sidewalk. Each child's movement was mirrored by a policeman who was looking straight at them. A policeman, an armed, grown, uniformed man who was under orders to stop them from stepping foot on campus. And then one of them said, "Let's go." And onto school property they stepped. And they were each grabbed and shoved into police cars, all but one. Again, 13-year-old Huey Maynor, who remained on the sidewalk. The policeman in front of him asked him, "Son, what are you going to do?" "I don't know," he said. Huey recalled, "I turned around and started walking down the sidewalk, and he started walking with me. So then I looked at him, and I took off running, and he took off running. And then I stopped real quick, and he ran past me, and then I stepped on school property. And that's when he got me and put me in the back of the police car." The police had been instructed to take them to the courthouse in the county seat of Lillington. Huey was one of 4 children in that one car, and there were several, along with the policeman. Noticing that the policeman's blackjack or nightstick, whatever you want to call it, was laying out, Huey took it. The policeman tried to take it back. Huey passed to the back seat, and there was a commotion inside that police car. And the officer told them, "Look, I'm just trying to do my job, that if you would just give me back my nightstick, I'll take you to get milkshakes. I'll buy you milkshakes." They like, "Sure, policeman, buy me a milkshake." They agreed. And so he went and took them and bought them milkshakes. And he dragged them in front of the judge in Lillington. And that many people in the courtroom, there was a commotion. The judge was completely flustered and said to the policeman, "Take them back where you got them from until we can get this worked out." So they were sent back to school. And so when they were sent back to school, the principal of the school and the Harnett County Board of Education had made it policy that if these children return, we're just going to pretend like they're not there. Don't call on them. Just pretend as if they're not there. Oh, yeah, that'll work. Just pretend like they're not there. So 21 students and their parents were arrested. Judge Bergwin ordered a hearing while the children were placed in homes to wait. They had to be taken from their parents because the Harnett County Board of Education had filed contempt charges against the parents. I guess the judge did that. At the hearing, the Harnett County Board of Education was represented by State Senator Robert Morgan and future North Carolina Supreme Court Chief Justice Beverly Lake. Now, in a previous episode, I had mentioned that Chief Justice Beverly Lake, that he had something of a shrine to the Confederacy in his office while he was Supreme Court Chief Justice. So you can pretty much see how this went down. The board's lawyers, their main argument was that allowing those students in would result in integration of all people and would result in integration attempts by black students, which should have been done anyway because the court... Anyway. So the parents collectively then hired their own lawyers who argued that the board violated the students' equal rights as set forth in the 14th Amendment because some schools were provided for some children, white and black, but not others. Instead, they sent them to a different county. So by late October, federal judge Albert Reeves had the case in his hand and told the Harnett County Board of Education, open your doors. It's the law. You don't have a choice not to obey it. Open your doors, and it dismissed the board's restraining order filed against these students. And the next year, those students walked into Dunn High School as students. And the next year, Boise Felder and Willis McCoy became the first two black students at Dunn High School. And integration, long time coming. And that's that. Hey, you know what's really cool about doing this is that I come across stories that many times I didn't know, and what's really cool is that at least in a couple of cases in the last few, the subjects of two of these podcasts I've known personally like my whole life, and I never knew these things because they didn't talk about them, but I didn't ask about them either. It's amazing how that works out. So it's sort of incumbent upon us to talk to these people, get their stories, because man, you never ever know what stories people have lived. And that's pretty much my soapbox, y'all. Until next time, I hope you enjoyed it, because I certainly did. And much respect to Huey Maynor and those students that paved the way. And until next time, be good.